Give me all the Norse historical fictions. Hello guys and welcome to I Love Reading, a channel about interesting book-related subreddit topics. If you love our content, please press the like button, leave a comment and lastly, if you're new here, subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started. So, I'm obsessed with Norse myths and culture. I sailed through Norse myths by Neil Gaiman, and it was great, and I have a few different academic books that are fun to read in my downtime. I've searched a few times for Norse historical fiction because academic books are great, but they can get repetitive. But I'm coming up dry. Does anyone have any recommendations? Just to clarify, are you looking for historical fiction about the Vikings in general, or novels that specifically include Norse mythology? Or both? At the moment, I can only come up with The Gospel of Loki by Joanne Harris. All of the above. Norse myths are so much fun. I've been telling them to my sons for a while now. Thor is their favorite because of course. LOL, Vikings are some of the most interesting people, and I can't get enough of learning about them. For historical fictions about Vikings then you'd probably enjoy Bernard Cornwell's Anglo-Saxon saga. First book is The Last Kingdom. Basically, about Alfred the Great's and his descendants' rise to power, much of which involved fending off the Vikings. The main character is a Saxon who was raised by Vikings. The Long Ships by Frans Bengtsson, Greenlanders by Jane Smiley. Came to recommend The Long Ships too. Such a dry comic read. Eaters of the Dead. Michael Crichton's retelling of Beowulf that he wrote on a bet and became the movie The 13th Warrior. Which I will always love for the scene montage in which Ahmed gradually learns the Norse language. Surprisingly good. The Half-Drowned King is the first of a trilogy by Linnea Hartziker about the old kings of Norway. The Last Kingdom. Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell is very good for Viking culture. The Gospel of Loki and the Testament of Loki are good too, they are the myths told from the point of view of Loki, so that's quite fun. Cecilia Holland's Corbin Loose Strife series, set among 10th century Vikings. This is really fun and travels across most of the Viking world. Ireland, England, Vinland, Constantinople, Russia, etc. The Deepest Sea by Charles Barnett. A fantasy novel set in 8th century Viking Ireland or rather England. Jane Smiley's The Greenlanders, about the Norse habitation of Greenland in the later Middle Ages. The actual medieval sagas are pretty engrossing reading. The Sagas of the Icelanders, with a foreword by Jane Smiley, is a more recent translation of some of them and super readable. Ditto the Kalevala, the Finnish folk epic upon which Tolkien based aspects of his own sagas. You Die When You Die by Angus Watson is crass, violent and gory, and I busted a gut laughing every other page. It's the first of a trilogy called West of West. It's less about teaching mythology and lore and more about the culture through following the characters, although there is a decent amount of mythology in there. I loved it. But it's not for kids. Okay, it's not exactly historical, but the Iron Druid books by Kevin Hearn do deal with the Norse pantheon, along with several others. Well worth a read. Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series by Rick Riordan. Tessa Gratton does some great stuff in the United States of Asgard series. The first is The Lost Son. They're young adult, but more serious and darker than Riordan's stuff. But still lots of fun. Have you ever read Beowulf? It doesn't really go into Norse mythology, but it's got epic monsters, ridiculously impossible feats done by heroes, a dragon. What more could you want? Even though it's hundreds of years old, it's one of my favorites. I'd suggest either the Seamus Heaney translation or the Tolkien translation. Heaney because that's the one I read and can personally vouch for, and Tolkien because of Tolkien. I loved Beowulf. I haven't read it since high school, but it was my absolute favorite segment in English literature. I should pick it up again. If you want to avoid yet another story of a young plucky Saxon boy who gets captured during a raid, raised by Vikings, and then switches sides to defend his homeland, try avoiding the Anglo-centric stuff. It annoys me no end that 99% of all Viking-related stories seem to deal with just the raids on England and France. Meanwhile, the Vikings traveled not just to America, but to Persia and possibly as far as China, helped the Byzantine Empire reconquer the Italian city-states, sacked half of mainland Europe, and founded Russia. By far the best book if you want a broader scope is Frans G. Bengtsson's The Long Ships. I would recommend you Vinland Saga, a really popular manga series by Makoto Yukimura, which is also now being streamed as an anime series. I am surprised that no one mentioned the Viking series by Tim Severin. It was a really nice read, and it tells a lot of Viking tales through a single main character. The Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. It covers a lot of different genre, but Asgard comes into it. I have a book, Norwegian Folk Tales from the collection of Peter Christian Asbjørnsen and Jorgen Moe, which I've enjoyed greatly. Not mythology though, sorry about that, but a number of the tales have trolls and hags. The Ashlad often figures in the stories. He's the boy who daydreams a lot and is considered rather useless by his family. He's called that because typically he'll sit by the fire and ponder things instead of getting his chores done. The more recent editions have a foreword by Neil Gaiman. I read a comment that you read to your son. These tales are great for that. Literally all I can think of is the Magnus Chase series by Rick Riordan, but they might be a bit childish for you. Honestly, I'm willing to give anything a go. If it's not necessarily geared for me, it could be good for my sons. I want them to have a pretty good working knowledge of different pantheons as they come up. We're not religious by any stretch of the word, but I feel like having a solid knowledge of the history of ancient and modern religions gives them a solid base to build their own belief off of. Norse gods are most compelling for me because they are flawed and ultimately very human. And honestly, who wouldn't love the story of Thor dressing up as Freya so he could steal back his hammer? Neil Gaiman also has a book titled Norse Mythology, which strings different Norse tales into a story arc. Haven't read it but I'm contemplating it. I've read it. It's great. My supervisor kept throwing me death glares because I was literally laughing out loud more times than I care to admit. Try The First Name by Dennis Schmidt. It is the first book in a trilogy that explains the Norse myths extremely well and molds them in with myths from other ancient peoples as well. There you have it, best Norse historical fictions books read by Redditors. Note: books talked about in the video can be accessed through the link on the description below. Thank you for watching till the end. If you loved the video, don't forget to press the like button and also subscribe to I Love Reading. See you on the next video.